Hello and welcome to Pursuit of Perfect System. In this video we are doing the review for the Chord Electronics Dave, and this review is going to be a little bit different to the normal reviews we do, and that is because it's actually not quite finished. There's still more I want to do with the Dave actually, and I'll talk about that more at the end. But before we get into the review for the Chord Electronics Dave, I want to thank Nintronics, the excellent hi-fi and AV dealership that has loaned me this sample for review. I really appreciate that. And obviously there'll be a link down below. Obviously go and visit their website if you're interested in buying any hi-fi or AV equipment. So looking at the Dave, it's been a really interesting journey to get to the point where I'm at now. And for me, that journey is not finished, but it's complete enough for me to be able to stand here and give you a very good account of what I've been able to achieve sound quality wise with the Dave in the system. Now, this is part of a really comprehensive review series that I started obviously a good few weeks ago, and there's been multiple update videos, there's been multiple song demonstration videos that I've already posted in the channel, and if you haven't seen those, I'll link the first one up there. Start at the beginning, work the way through, because I think there's a lot to learn there for, well, maybe existing Dave owners, but definitely people that are potentially going to buy the Dave or look to incorporate the Dave at some point in their systems. I went through a steep learning curve with the Dave, and it wasn't straightforward. I had to pay a lot of attention to detail to get the sound quality out of it that I did. But come the end of all that effort, attention to detail and work, the sound quality was absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to use the word incredible. What I'd suggest is, on the website, I've posted a very comprehensive full written review for my time with the Dave so far, go into a lot of detail. So what I don't want to do is duplicate all that information in this video review. It seems pointless. So what I'm going to do in the video review is focus on some key areas and talk you through those. And those key areas are going to be interaction with the Dave, because I think that's really important in the way you can use it. Comparisons with the Chord Electronics Qutest DAC, because that is the DAC I've been using as my reference point up until now. I'm going to look at the perceived value, obviously, of the Dave, which I've kind of covered through the process, but I want to talk about that because I think it's really important when you've got a product at this price. And then I'm going to talk about where I'm going from here with the Dave. So start at the beginning. Now, a product at this sort of price point, I feel the interaction with it, the quality of the interaction with it needs to be there. And if you look at the screen, obviously you can see me obviously rotating this dial. This dial feels incredibly well built. Obviously it clicks in to mute the products, clicks out to unmute the products, and just as a volume knob, it's just a volume dial really, but it's a really nice one. It feels really high quality, it feels built to last. To me, little touches like that when you're spending this sort of money really make the difference. Obviously with the Dave we get an LCD screen on the front. Comparison to the more recent Chord designs where we've got the coloured spheres to select our options, I really like those. I think that's a really quirky way of doing things, but there is no replacing a dedicated screen with written options that you can clearly see what you're doing and what you're selecting. I actually really like that. When we put the Dave up in the Coral ensemble stand, not only does it look really nice because it tilts the Dave at a certain angle, I just think it's much easier to see the screen when you're sitting back in your listening position. The remote control for this is a really interesting one, because for a product at this price point, the remote control feels very cheap, feels very plasticky, and it does feel a bit naff. And when you compare the remote control for the Dave to the remote controls you get with products like Devialet, or the remote controls you get with YBA products, which are really substantial, you know, a lot of thought and attention to detail has gone into those because they are probably the thing you interact with the most. You know, this is an area where really I suppose the Dave disappoints in a sense. But what's really kind of the flip side of that is when you're actually using the remote control, it works perfectly. So it kind of justifies itself, even though at this price point it'd be nice to use something that's a little more lavish. It's not far from the end of the world because it actually works really well. On the rear of the Dave, we've got a lot of different connections. There's a lot of BNC input options. There's a lot of BNC output options, digital, analog, balanced. Absolutely perfect, I think, the amount of connections that we've got. But what's not on the back is any labelling, which is odd. I've not seen that before. So it's probably because there's not space and the writing would have been tiny. But when you buy the Dave and you look to set it up, make sure you get the instruction manual out. Otherwise, you'll be connecting things possibly in the wrong place. So let's move on to the comparisons. How does a Dave sound by comparison to the Qutest? And why is that important? Well, it's not really, because these are different products at completely different ends of the budget scale. But it gets important because if you remember back maybe 6-8 months ago when I was reviewing the Qutest, I said I'd made it sound like the Dave. And that's because I had. And having both of them here, I had. And how I've done that is using it as a standalone DAC. Now, don't get me wrong, the Dave is a better performer than the Qutest as a standalone DAC into the system we've got here, which is obviously with the Luxman preamp power combination. But the difference wasn't as big as the price difference would justify. So I think that's something to bear in mind. That is because the Qutest performs at an outstanding level once you've paid serious attention to the details. The sound quality you can get out of the Qutest is outstanding. And yet, obviously the Dave, when you listen to it without most of those attentions to details, still good power, still good cables, and still some isolation, as you can see there. You can clearly hear where it's a better DAC. You can clearly hear what the extra tap length filters and the higher pulse array DAC chip does. It gives you more clarity, it gives you more cleaner and clear transient response. But the difference doesn't necessarily justify itself. Now, there's one massive caveat to that comment. If you've watched the review series, you'll know possibly what I'm going to say. I spent a lot of time with the Dave tweaking and tuning and improving the sound of our Source to get better sound out of the Dave when I was using it as a DAC and a preamplifier. I haven't then tried using it with all those adjustments and improvements as a DAC on its own. And I personally think the improvements I've made to the Source will have a massive knock-on effect to how the Dave sounds as a standalone DAC. But we've got to also factor in a better Source is going to make the Qutest sound better. But I don't think that is really where we get A, the best performance from the Dave, and B, the best value. I found through my testing, again, you'll probably notice if you've watched the review series to where we are, that using the Dave as a DAC and preamplifier was like unlocking another level of quality of sound, not only from the Dave itself, but from our review system. Using the Dave as the preamplifier gave a very raw sound, and by raw I just mean very uncoloured to the incoming signal, giving us an ultra clean, ultra precise, ultra clean and clear overall presentation. At that point, the difference between £1,200 Qutest and the £8,500 Dave really starts to make a lot of sense, and it really starts to justify that difference in price point, which moves us quite nicely, I think, onto the value proposition of the Dave, which I've touched on in some of the videos leading up to now. If you consider the Dave as a standalone DAC at its price point of £8,500, we're still getting arguably the most advanced DAC on the market in the world. If you factor in that it's a very, very high quality preamplifier, then the £8,500 divided by those two things, arguably the best DAC in the world and a really high performing preamplifier, that overall cost split between those two things then makes a lot more sense in terms of value. And actually, when you think of it like that, the Dave is actually really good value. It's actually a really good value product, even at £8,500. So that's not all we get. We also get a headphone amplifier. Now, I tested the headphone amplifier using the AudioQuest Night Owl Carbon headphones, which I have on my head for many hours of every day, and I know those headphones now inside and out, and I still really like them. I still think they're fantastic, and I actually thought it was going to be a really lovely combination with the Dave, having heard it as a headphone amplifier a couple of times at shows and when I had it here previously. Now, I really love the Dave. I think it's an absolutely outstanding hi-fi product, which you probably know already from what I've said about it. It sounds incredible. But unfortunately for me, I don't love the headphone amplifier section of it as much as I do the integration of it within a hi-fi system. Now, I think that's because of its sound balance. What I do really like about the headphone section of the Dave is the sound is very clean and clear, as we would expect. It's very immediate. The vocals sound very, very close. Everything sounds close. We do get very good sound stage, but there's a lovely kind of sharpness and snappiness and immediacy to the sound. After a while, I did find that to be a little bit tiring in terms of a presentation, and I think that's because of the sound balance. For me, there was too much upper energy, too much, whether it be upper mids or treble energy, to balance with the bass. I found the bass to be very controlled and have lots of drive to it, but it just wasn't enough for me. Not enough bass to balance with the rest of the sound. Really, for me, that is like an extra. So if we say that is about our £500, when it comes to value, we're getting arguably the best DAC chip in the world for £4,000, and we're getting an outstanding preamplifier for £4,000. And the fact we get all of that in one really nice chassis which doesn't take up a huge amount of space. Obviously, it takes up a lot more space when you put it in the ensemble stand, but you know, it doesn't take up a huge amount of space. We've not then got loads of extra wires and cables and plugs necessary for it. So in fact, we get all of that in one nice chassis, which is very, very easy to live with, very easy to love as well. Actually makes a lot of sense. So I want to move on really to the final section of this review, and that is speaking about where I want to go from here, because this has been a really interesting product to review. I wasn't expecting it, actually. It's been very, very interesting for two areas. One, it opened up my eyes to how I had the system set up and how I've been listening to the system for quite a long time, and how wrong that was. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't grossly wrong, it just was slightly off in a few areas. And when you can hear that clearly, you're able to go and make changes to be able to improve things. And once I'd made those improvements, then I started getting an outstanding sonic presentation with the Dave in the system. As I say, as a DAC and a preamplifier, it's by far the most natural our reference review system has sounded. With the Dave in the system, we've had the best clarity, we've had the best resolution, we've had the best scale, we've had the best bass quality and dynamic bass. We've had outstanding spatial reproduction, i.e. the room disappears and you're transported to the listening environment that the recording was made in. That's been by far the best it's ever been in our listening room with the Dave. And because of that, it makes it really difficult to go back from that, because it's so engaging and enjoyable to listen to. And it sets a new bar, a new precedent bar for sound quality, what you can achieve. And in my mind, it's changed what I actually want from a sonic presentation and what I actually appreciate about it. So that's been a really interesting learning curve that I've got to so far with the Dave. And I say so far, it's because I still think there's a lot more quality locked away in here. And I'm going to do my best to get one of these either on a very long-term loan or on very long-term loan, aka purchase, because I think it's going to be a really interesting product to have at the heart and the core of the system for quite a few different reasons. The first reason will be for comparisons to other products. How do other DACs sound by comparison to the Dave? How do other preamplifiers sound in comparison to the Dave? So that's going to be really, really interesting. It also means we can put in some really high quality power amplifiers on their own and test them out on their own with, you know, the kind of ultra clean raw presentation we get from the Dave to get the most out of those power amplifiers. That's really interesting. It actually works for me in this very limited space that I'm reviewing, because it's a hi-fi and an AV system. Having the Dave actually on top of our KEF center speaker here, I know some people really don't like that, I don't think that's a good idea, but it actually works in terms of where it is, how easy it is to access it. Then it allows me some other free space for other products. So in a way, it's working really great for me. But I think more importantly than that is that I'm a big believer in the quality of the source. And I spend a lot of time and effort in tweaking the source. I need something that's going to give me those improvements in their most raw fashion. And that's exactly what you get from the Dave. You get a very raw representation of what comes in, and that gives you a very, very low noise floor, clean version of what comes out. And the KEF reference speakers are very, you can use the word fussy, but they are very transparent to what signal quality that they get. That's one of their biggest strengths and potentially their biggest weaknesses if you don't feed them with the right quality signal. I'll be reporting back over time how I get on, the improvements that I make, the things that I do to get the Dave to sound better, because I think that'll be really, really interesting. It's very obvious to bolt on something like a Blue Mark II scaler. It's very obvious going to give you an improved sound. Everybody knows that. And I'm sure the Hugo M scaler, which will be released soon, will do the exact same thing. But I found the Dave to be very, very sensitive. Sensitive as a baby's bottom is how I described it in the written review. And isolation products seem to make a really big difference. So I want to test out other things. So that is where I'm hoping, touch wood, that we're going to be going in the future with the channel, with the Dave. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been useful. Don't forget, there's a far more comprehensive written review on our website. Make sure you go and see that. There's also been a lot of new hot news updates on there and some other stuff. So definitely go and visit the website. Hope you've enjoyed this one. We'll be seeing you in the next one. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Take care.